And then I will invite Nick McCormack and Andy Blythe. They are both station managers at Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service for a long time. More than 20 years they've been active in this fire department, and they're going to tell us about the Liverpool car park fire. Because they have a really big presentation, they need the full 45 minutes. And I agreed with Nick and Andy that if you have any questions, you can do it during the lunch break and during the afternoon, because otherwise they're running short in time. So please just spare your questions, and they are really happy to answer them, but because of the short time, it's not possible before the break. Or maybe we can take some of your lunch time and then we can have some questions anyway. So, Andy, Nick.
Thank you.
Andy, Nick. Yeah. Morning, everybody.
This morning you said something else to me, eh?
Indeed, we're the only double act on the stage during the conference, and we've called ourselves Laurel and Hardy for the day. So we're going to present a bit of slapstick firefighting for you. Okay, so we're here today to talk about the King's Dock car park fire, 31st of December 2017. The fire resulted in the loss of 1,150 cars to the fire, the destruction of the building, and an estimated cost of £100 million. We've split this presentation into two sides. Andy's going to talk about the operational side of the incident, and I'm going to talk about the fire regulation side of the incident and how they impacted on our firefighters and how we might need to have a little look at how we attack these buildings in a fire sense. I've been in the fire service for 22 years. I've never seen anything like this incident. I attended the incident on the night. And I hasten to add that I wasn't the first attending officer in charge. I attended about approximately an hour into the incident while Andy was sat at home drinking wine on New Year's Eve.
I was going to say that bit.
And just to give you an overview, in case you're in any doubt, Liverpool is in the northwest of England, and if you click into Google Centre of the Universe, this is the image you'll get. And if you zoom in further in that, you will actually finish up on the centre spot at Anfield. Okay, this is Merseyside, our region, and on the night of the fire, I was stationed at Aintree Racecourse, which is about there. Aintree Fire Station, close to Aintree Racecourse. Here's Liverpool city centre with the waterfront in front of us. And here's the car park and the Echo Arena here, Arena Conference Centre, Liverpool. Here's the iconic Three Graces, the Liver building included in them. You can see it's a central location. It's New Year's Eve. I'm at Aintree Fire Station. One of the firefighters is preparing a nice curry. And I'm on the tannoy goes down. Our appliances move to Old Swan Fire Station, and by the time I get to Old Swan Fire Station, which is a fire station closer to the centre of town, the alarms go at that station as well. And I rip off the sheet, make pumps 8 to a car park fire. So there's obvious questions of how do we go from a car on fire to 1,150 vehicles on fire. Andy's going to go through the operational side of that now and attempt to explain. And we've got some maths involved in this presentation. It won't be as complex as the young guys this morning with those equations, so you can put away your scientific calculators. If you can do your times table, you'll be fine. Okay, so without further ado, I'll introduce Andy to the forum, and he's going to talk to you about the operational side of the incident.
Cheers, Nick. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Chair. It's a great honour to be here to present our findings from the incident. Obviously, it was one of the most significant incidents we've faced in many years. Obviously, my part of the investigation looked at the operational response side, what we did, how we could improve, the lessons we need to learn from that, and then sharing that learning. And obviously, next I'm going to talk about fire protection. As this is a fire protection, fire safety, engineering kind of conference, the operational side is a little bit smaller and it's concentrate more on the fire protection issues. Well, hopefully this will give you an overview of what occurred on the night and the kind of conditions that the firefighters were facing. Okay, so we'll start by, as Nick's already mentioned, we've gone from a single car on fire and a car park that looked like that early on in the evening to towards the end of the evening looked like that, totally involved in fire. I'm sure you'll agree it's quite a significant fire there. Okay, so a little bit more about the car park itself. We've already seen this on the Liverpool waterfront, but just a few more details for you. The Echo Arena Conference Centre is there, and the River Mersey is there. So the car park itself is in the centre of quite a few number of buildings. You've got hotel complex on this side, and on the other two sides of the car park, you see there are residential flats, and you can see how close those flats are to the sides of the car park. This hotel was built, this is an older image, but obviously you get an idea of how enclosed the car park was. Okay, so the car park itself, 8 levels, 4 stairwells, one on each side of the car park, and in each of those stairwells was a dry rising main. So because of the proximity of the flats around the car park, the building itself was designed for an internal firefighting attack using those dry rising mains. It's also worth mentioning the ramp structure within the car park. This allows obviously vehicles to move within the floor levels, but as you see on the ramp, there's also parking spaces. So on both sides of the ramp, on every floor, vehicles are parked on those ramp systems as well. Okay, then if you look at the front elevation of the car park, when the first crews attended on that night, this is the view they were met with. So you can see very little of the car park at all. Am I talking too fast? Okay. Okay, so the day of the incident, it was New Year's Eve, approaching 4:30 in the afternoon. It was dark and it was windy. The afternoon session of the Liverpool International Horse Show was just coming to an end, and there was approximately 7,000 to 8,000 people inside that conference centre. Car park was at near full capacity. Because it was a horse show, the ground floor level of the car park had stabling for 149 horses, and those horses were in the car park. But also externally, this area here, there were another 51 horses stabled there, so this whole area was covered with stables. Now, just to touch on water supplies while we're looking at this slide here. We've got the River Mersey on the side over there, but at 4:30 that afternoon, it was low water, so that was a mud bank. So although it looks like it's surrounded by water, that wasn't accessible. This dockland area here, obviously there's a huge source of open water there, but the access for the open water was this pontoon area, which was covered in stables. Okay, wind direction was running north to south. And approximately 16:24, the vehicle in which the fire started, it was a Range Rover, came to the car park, proceeded to level 3 and parked up. Documents got out and walked away. 5 minutes later, the first signs on CCTV of fire occurring. You can't really see it on there, but when you watch a video, you can see wispy smoke drifting across there. That was 16:29. The first call to the fire service didn't come in for another 13 minutes, and Nick's going to go through some human behaviour a little bit later on. But obviously those 13 minutes are crucial when you're thinking about speed and weight of attack and trying to get appliances and firefighters there to extinguish a fire. Okay, so that was the view at the time of call. Obviously you can see the car park's very tightly packed. Because it was a horse show as well, a lot of people had big 4x4 vehicles, so a lot of fire loading within the car park itself. Just one thing to point out is the time difference. The CCTV cameras on every floor inside the car park and outside the car park, but unfortunately a lot of the times didn't match up, so we had to do quite a bit of work to try and triangulate the exact time. Nick spent probably 3 months watching CCTV and lost a lot of his life to it, but it was vital in determining how things escalated. Okay, so that was a time call to the fire service then. So 1644, our fire control room mobilised 2 appliances to the incident. And a minute later, that's the 5th call coming into the fire service. And again, you see the fires developing all the time. Okay, the first 2 appliances were in attendance, 8 and 9 minutes respectively. And you remember that picture I showed you of the front of the car park? That's where they attended. It was dark. It was a scene of chaos. There were people milling around, people concerned about horses. There were people trying to release horses into that area, which would have been really uncontrolled and really dangerous. Obviously, there were site staff there as well, and because the car park's obscured, there wasn't really any, signs of fire at that point in time. So delays with the site staff, and then they repositioned their appliances based on the information they received from them to a plaza area. Okay, so they pulled up here initially, and there's a lot of people around here, but the site staff say, well, you go around the corner onto this paved area. The car that's on fire is on this side of the building, and you'll be able to access it from there. So both appliances drove around, parked up here. There's a dry rising inlet there and a protected staircase there, so that's where they started to set up their initial firefighting attack. It's worth pointing out that on this slide here, the openings on the windows were all covered in metal grills with quite small kind of apertures in it. Okay, 1656. So the appliances have only been in attendance a few minutes, but external CCTV looking into the car park level, you can see a bit more that the fires obviously continue to develop at quite a quick rate. The officer in charge goes up beside the staircase, looks into the floor level, and rather than a car on fire, he observes 8 to 10 cars on fire on that level. So obviously it's quite a big fire now. Okay, 1708, the first breathing apparatus crews are deployed into the building. And if you remember the image we had at the time of call, and obviously it's quite a clear atmosphere, you see the fire down there. 1708, the first BA team went in, and that's the exact same camera. So you can see on there, the whole view is obscured by smoke. That white line there is the torch beam off one of the BA wearers. Okay, so obviously the fire was continuing to develop and escalate, so they requested further resources quite quickly, and they arrived on scene quite quickly as well. So 8 machines, 10 machines. We call them fire appliances. I don't know what you guys would call them. The fire was primarily in this area here when you're observing it from the outside. It's also worth noting the second stairwell here, because later on in the incident, crews were deployed from that stairwell into level 3 and later level 4. Okay, so we have a look at an overhead line drawing of the car park level. So this is car park level 3. This is the vehicle of origin. That's the exact bay where it parked. The small rectangle shows the main area where the fire is contained to on level 3. The red arrows show where breathing apparatus teams were on that level. So at this point in time, they think, okay, we've got it surrounded. We can see each other on the other side of this fire. We're on level 3. We're in a concrete box. We're going to put this out. They described a lot of running fuel fires, lots of explosions. The building was shaking. Probably quite a scary environment to be in, really. But they worked very hard, very bravely, and so they had the fire surrounded on that level. But then they started reporting concrete exploding, holes appearing in the ceiling. You can see cars on the floor above on fire. They described waterfalls of fire coming down from the floor above. So at this point, obviously, thinking the fire had spread upstairs, they committed teams onto level 4. When we spoke to all the crews after the incident, this red rectangle there, that's the ramp area. But the teams who came down here, made statements to say that this area of vehicles wasn't involved at all. So however it spread up to the floor above, they didn't know at that time. Okay, so approximately 1823, there's a tactical change. There's a massive increase in the fire and the amount of smoke coming off the building. External CCTV, you can see that image there is quite clear. This is looking at the southwest corner of the car park. Literally 1 minute later, that was the same view. So there's been some kind of major event, development within the car park itself. Okay, so 1820 to 1838, all the crews are withdrawn from the car park. The conditions are deteriorating rapidly. The stairwells become compromised with smoke, so everyone's withdrawn. And there's a short video just to show you here, and I'll give you an idea of the way the fire was developing. So I'll show the video, it's only a few seconds, and then we'll just talk about it. I'm going to grab a drink of water while that's playing.
As we're in our car park, as you can see, the fire is just spreading. Every time it gets to another car, it's just exploding. Literally the whole arena has been evacuated.
Okay, so you can see quite a significant fire taking place there. Now that's actually, where the fire is there, that's level 4. See where the lights are there, that's level 3. So that's where our primary fire attack's been taking place. So looking at that, you think, okay, the crews on level 3 actually were doing quite well there. But obviously, whatever's happened on the upper levels has caused the problems. At that point in the video there were still firefighters on level 4 down this end of the building, albeit because of the way the conditions were changing, they've been given an emergency withdrawal signal on their telemetry sets on the BA. So they were withdrawing, but literally within 2 minutes, the whole level, well, level 4, 5, and 6 were fully involved in fire. Had they been there at that time, it would have been maybe some serious consequences for them. And I'd say literally within an hour, less than an hour, the whole building was consumed. So at this point, obviously, there's no way you can attack that internally. The metal grills on the outside prevented any jets being sent into the building. It was just dissipating the jets, so not much effect there. And a major incident was declared. 1849, our chief fire officer was the incident commander at scene. And then the focus then, you remember how close the flats were on either side? The focus then switched to protecting the surrounding buildings, the hotels. And the crews actually did a really great job because the crews were actually inside the flats, firing water jets out the windows into the car park to stop that fire from spreading. And although there was some superficial external damage on the flats, they saved all those surrounding buildings. Obviously, couldn't save the car park. Okay, so when we did our operational kind of investigation into it, we looked at 20 areas, but obviously with time, I'm only going to look at one of those areas. But feel free, we're quite happy to share any information we found. It's all on our fire service website, or I can send it to you if you give me your business cards or whatever. So the area I'm going to look at is to do with the vehicles and the heat output and the heat absorption of our firefighting branches. Okay, so when the first team went in, you remember that image at 1708 where there's a little white line showing the BA torch? When they first went in, they reported 18 to 20 vehicles. So that's about 15 minutes after the OIC went in and saw 8 to 10. So you can see it's increasing all the time. And if we work on an average, and it's probably quite a conservative estimate considering the types of vehicles that are in the car park, of 5 megawatts per vehicle, that gives us a conservative estimate of a fire of 200 megawatts, and that's when the first BA team's gone in. Temperatures would have been well above 1100 degrees at ceiling height. And then compare that to the heat absorption rate of our firefighting branches. We use 52 mil hose, low pressure branches which can deliver 475 litres per minute. Heat absorption rate of 25 megawatts per main branch. But obviously because of the size and the intensity of the fire, to have extinguished that 200 megawatt fire, we would have required 8 main branches, and that's at the moment in time when they first walk through the door. Okay, a dry riser in that building can provide 3 hose lines. One we'd always keep as a safety branch. So each dry riser is going to provide you with 2 attack branches. So all 4 dry risers would have to be charged, all the hose lines run out, 8 attack lines going into the car park on that initial attack to have a chance of putting this fire out. So it would have taken 12 of our fire appliances and crews to be able to deliver that kind of capacity. But the predetermined attendance, which we use in the UK, I don't know what you call it in the Netherlands, but the PDA for this fire was 2 appliances. It was a car fire. And so obviously the crews, from the very word go, were facing a really tough battle there. So just to summarise then for the operational side on this point, we can see that the heat output from the vehicles on fire in the initial attendance far exceeded the weight of attack and the way that the fire escalated. And the amount of water available at the time as well. I should have mentioned actually before, when we looked at the open water supplies, the dock is stated on a pressure-fed water ring main. So as more and more appliances set into that main, it obviously reduced the amount of pressure available at the branches. So they had a limited amount of water initially. As resources were increased, they couldn't match the heat build-up and the escalation of fire, although appliances arrived on scene, make pumps 12 quite quickly. The rate at which the fire was escalating through the building, they could never keep up with it. The building was designed with the priority of saving life, and no human life was lost in the building, although I think we came very close. Unfortunately, a couple of dogs are known to have perished in the fire. We did rescue 6 dogs on the evening and the next day. Okay, as you saw before, because of the proximity of the surrounding flats, the building was designed primarily for internal firefighting tactics. But crucially, on the evening, and from speaking to all the crews involved, the building didn't behave as they would have expected. Obviously, they're thinking about a concrete structure. They got the fire surrounded, and then before they know it, the fire's gone through the building, and they weren't quite sure why until we did our research. So that's it for the operational side of it. As I said, it's only one area. Feel free to ask me afterwards about anything else, because we've looked into all sorts of things with regards to pre-planning, tactics, firefighting media, command and control. So there are lots of areas we looked at. So obviously, please feel free to approach me later. I'm going to pass over to Nick now, and he's going to take on the fire protection elements of the reports.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So Andy's written a significant incident report, significant incident review into this fire. It's a 60-odd page document that's available on our website, and we appreciate that as a whistle-stop tour, and it's probably provoked more questions amongst you than give you the answers. So as Andy says, please feel free to have a look at that.
Yeah, it's not very expensive.
I've written a report into the protection side of things, and that's what I'm going to go through with you now. So the main question that we sort of asked ourselves is, do the current building regulations need review? Now let's bear in mind that the design of that building will determine the strategies for that building and the risk assessments for that building, and then the firefighting tactics for that building coming in later on. And as Andy's very well explained to you, that fire, by the time that the fire service have arrived, the fire is already getting beyond them. So I'm going to look at specifically the design of the King's Dock car park. I'm going to look at the current building regulations in the UK. Importantly, I'm going to look at the research behind those regulations, and I'm going to juxtapose that with more recent research and the incident research that gave us up. And on that point, I'd just like to throw a quote in from Luke Bisbee, who actually presented yesterday. And he said, "Real fires provide the most authentic feedback for building design." And this is a real fire. And we need to think about the design of our buildings. We're then going to look at the fire spread. So Andy's touched on the lateral fire spread and a vertical fire spread throughout that building. And importantly as well, we have to look at ourselves and our thought processes as operational personnel about how we expect that building to behave and the realities of the situations. I'm also going to look at the management of the building and touch on the human behaviour element to fire. I heard a little bit of laughter when we saw somebody looking at that fire on the phone. and there was some bizarre behaviour by members of the public and staff on the evening in question. Okay, the car park design then. It's an 8-storey open-sided car park. And what do we mean by open-sided? It means that the sides are open. And the design is that all the smoke and heat will dissipate, and then the fire won't spread. In order for it to conform to the building regulations, it has to have an open side area of 1/20th of the footprint of the building, and it has to have 1/40th of that area on opposing walls to create airflow. Now, if you look back as well, there's a few gasps from the audience when Andy put up the surrounding buildings. Could they impact on the free flow of air through the car park? Again, they did attain building compliance in putting those buildings that close to the car park. The firefighting shafts on the building, Andy pointed 4 of those out. Original design only wanted 2 shafts, 4 staircases but 2 shafts, but due to the size of that building, I imagine you got the scale of it there, it's 90 metres by 90 metres. So with 2 shafts you would have a potential 45-metre run to try and get your hose to that incident. So in the consultation process with the local authority and the building designers, Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service Protection Department insisted on 4 stairwells that were protected. They also insisted on the width of those staircases being wider, because it's predominantly an event car park. And what do we mean by that, and how does that impact on the stair width? Well, your normal car park you think of, people come and what do they do in a car park? They park their cars, thank you, and they leave. Now, you would expect with that a sort of ebb and flow throughout the day and a transient population coming in and going at your retail outlets, and industrial outlets, wherever. There might be a bit of a rush hour, 9 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock at night. However, an event car parking is everybody arrives at the same time and everybody leaves at the same time. Okay. One thing that did work in our favour on the night was that it was the horse show, so it wasn't an Elton John concert. Had it been an Elton John concert, it's the encore, Candle in the Wind, and everybody gets up out of the seats and goes to that car park. So interviews with the staff of that car park told us that it would take up to an hour for a vehicle to exit that car park. And as Andy alluded to before, vehicles are parked on the ramping system as well, which is quite an unusual design, so vehicles would be reversing out. So we have to ask ourselves a few questions, the what-if questions. What if that was an Elton John concert? And what if it was a concert that would attract children and teenagers and different types of people who would be going to that concert, and the difficulties that we might have had in achieving the evacuation. Skip back up one. No sprinklers in the car park. No design requirement for sprinklers in an open-sided car park because all the hot smoke and gas vents to fresh air. When the car park was built in 2008, it complied with Approved Document B. Approved Document B is one of a suite of 5, 6 approved documents that determine building design, and Approved Document B deals with the fire issues within buildings. Let's drill down into those building regulations a little bit. There's Approved Document B in all its glory. And it's based on some assumptions. And those assumptions are that the fire load is well defined. Is it? We'll have a little look at that. There's all different types of vehicles in our car parks now, and Niels has just given us a presentation on very different types of fire loading. Where the car park is well ventilated, there is low probability of fire spread from one story to another. Well, really. But it did actually happen at our car park and other car parks. Materials should be non-combustible in the construction, and the minimum, and there's a word that we'll use again when we look at building regulations, they are minimum requirements of 15 minutes open-sided. Now that building structure stood up well. It didn't partially or totally collapse after 15 minutes, but that wasn't due to the thought processes behind approved document B and the firefighting within that. That was more to do with the actual footprint of the building and the width of the columns and beams to take the load that meant the building stood up. The building is now unsafe and is due to be demolished, and the insurance companies are having a bit of a chat about that. Okay, and there's no, again, I'm going to use the S word again, there's no requirement for sprinklers in an open-sided car park. Okay, here's table A2. We won't dwell on this too long, and that just gives us our design requirements here for an open-sided car park, not more than 18 minutes, 15 minutes fire resistance, 30 minutes increased for the elements that are around the protected staircases. Okay, yeah. This is a photograph of the western elevation of the car park, and this is the southern side of the car park where those flats are. And as Andy said, we're firefighting. Now the fire strategy and again the fire regulations determine boundaries between buildings, but the boundary is determined by this building here, and the fire strategy is for spread from here to here, not from here to here, because this is an open-sided car park, and the fire won't spread from story to story. Rather worryingly, in Merseyside, we have this design across the city for aesthetic purposes, and we have a hospital that is surrounded. The hospital envelops an open-sided car park on 3 sides. And that hospital doesn't have windows in any of the 3 sides that envelop that car park. And that hospital has a firefighting strategy for fire spread from the hospital to the car park, and not the car park to the hospital. And thus they have electrical car parking points within that car park, and they've sited those electrical points right next to the entrance to the hospital. Okay. So, I said I was going to talk about the research behind how we arrived at the building regulations. I'm going to spend a bit of time on this slide. And there's 2 main bits of research on here. So I'm going to ask the question that our approved document now is designed on the firefighting and the fire capabilities of building is decided on one of these 2. One from 1968 and one from 2010. And bearing in mind the approved document B was written in 2010. Maybe have a show of hands. Who thinks that the approved document is based on this? Know your audience. Okay. Yeah, you're all right. It's based on 1968 technologies. And that 1968 Ministry for Technology and Fire Officers Note 10, that research was commissioned by the steel industry and a car park purpose group. Prior to that, in the 1950s, a car park was put into a purpose group of a petrol store because of the petrol in the vehicles. But the steel industry came along and started growing, and it's cheaper to build a car park out of steel if you fire resist it to 15 minutes than it is to build a car park out of steel to fire resist it to an hour. And vice versa as well, so it's more expensive to construct out of concrete. So, in 1968, fire will not spread from one vehicle to another. And the Building Research Establishment conducted a series of tests between 2006 and 2009, putting different rigs of different vehicles together in different combinations. And they concluded that fire will spread from one vehicle to another, even via an unfilled bay. Why would that be? So we skip down the list a little bit to the heat release in 1968, which was a 1950s Ford Anglia with a nice walnut dash, horsehair-filled seats and leather upholstery. To our more modern vehicles, in 2008, they've got a lot more polymers, plastics in them. I think they used, just bear in mind that they used older vehicles for this. So they used vehicles from 2004, 2002. I believe one was a Datsun Cherry. Not my vehicle of choice, but I suppose it's okay to burn them. Okay, so 1968, disruption of petrol tanks will not occur, and pressure relief valves negate explosion. Great. Running fuel fires were witnessed in all the BRE experiments, and I did a bit of further research and found that 85% of petrol tanks in Europe are now plastic, and the ECE Regulation 34, off the top of my head, states that a 2-minute flame impingement on that tank is all that's required, and the thought process behind that is that you should be able to exit your vehicle within 2 minutes and not be able to come by a fire. However, when it's a parked vehicle and it's vehicles side by side, and these fuel tanks disrupt, we get a running fuel fire. Okay, we'll skip back up. Smoke layer, mainly at ceiling level in the experiments in 1968. But it was the obscuration rates there, in 2006 they said it's the same as an enclosed structure. And we saw Andy's slide before with the photograph of the helmet torch, the BA. Pretty well obscured, wasn't it? The heat release there, 2006, 4.75 megawatts. And they're on older vehicles, so the vehicles are bigger now. So that was Andy's estimate at 5, which we consider rather conservative, an estimate for heat release from a vehicle. Now we've put it closer to 6. And we're looking a little bit about the exponential effect of one vehicle to a 2-vehicle fire and how that leaps from 2 to 16 megawatts. Oh, went off a little bit early there, sorry. Oh. Can we go back?
Can you keep going back on that?
Perfect. Well done. Okay, so the experimental work carried out in 1968 confirms that the outbreak of a fire is unlikely to result in uncontrollable damage or serious damage to the building. Now, the BRE, on the other hand, concluded that essentially probably would happen, but quite bizarrely, they come up with the conclusion there's no evidence to indicate that the current provisions in ADB for the protection of car parks needs revision. It's not just me. Okay, was King's Dock car park an isolated incident? No, it wasn't. And we can sort of liken this to Grenfell. We could have seen this coming. 2004, Gretchenbach, Switzerland. An underground car park collapsed and resulted in the death of 7 firefighters. We had Monica Wills in the UK in 2006. This was in Bristol and Avon area, and that resulted in the fire death of an elderly gentleman. Although he wasn't in the car park at the time of the incident, he was in the flats above it, was overcome by the smoke and heat. Stansted Airport, close to London, in 2010, 20 vehicles. And then we've got the Boomtown Festival in the south of England in 2016. Resulted in 80 vehicles being consumed by fire. Now, forgive me, but an open-sided car park doesn't come more open-sided than that. Okay. So how did that fire spread? How do you go from one vehicle on fire to this scene? We'll look look at these people a little bit later, but that's just showing a bit of fire spread, and that fire growing in intensity. So what we've noticed is there's a drainage channel that runs the length of the car park, north to south, and it acts as an expansion joint as well, that we were explained. So you recall Andy's, one of Andy's slides from before, the vehicle fires are confined to this area due to the tactics of the firefighters surrounding the fire. So how did it spread upwards? Well, here's the configuration of the drainage system. We have a plastic elbow joint, and we remember fire-resisting construction. That goes into an aluminium drainage channel, which will melt at 660 degrees Celsius. And above that drainage channel is our drainage slot, 15 millimetres wide, which runs the length of that car park, and vehicles actually park over that drainage slot. Okay. So here's what it looked like after the fire. The drainage slot, as the aluminium trays melted away. There's the hole in the pillar from before. So what we've essentially got is the superheated gases, blowtorch effect, running up that, and we can see that that's going to form a curtain as well. So when the firefighters came out talking about a waterfall of fire, I believe some of them were not more of our experienced crews who
some of our recruits, yeah.
So we kind of took a step back to think, have they really seen this, or are they just a little bit excited? But no, that essentially that's what's happened. Okay, for our technicals in the room, I've included a nice schematic of the drainage system. And here we've got our 95mm precast concrete, which again, forming the elements of structure only requires 15 minutes fire resistance. And then, though the initial fire's gone up through the drainage system, the spalling of the concrete due to the high temperatures in there has then led to the holes in the floors and ceilings that we saw in the cars coming through those ceilings. Okay, and this is borne out by CCTV footage. This is the 4th floor of the car park, and as Andy said before, I lost about 3 months of my life to this. However, it wasn't the only thing I was doing for those 3 months. We were actually doing other things, such as interviews and the like. Okay, so this is 5 to 6, and then 18 minutes later, we've gone from a smallish fire to a very large fire. The BRE tests bear this out, because the first vehicle will burn in one of the tests they did at 2 megawatts for 20 minutes, and thereafter we go directly within 2 minutes of the second vehicle being involved to a 16 megawatt fire. So when our crews were committed, there was 8 vehicles involved in fire, so it's a huge fire that they were dealing with. And also just bear in mind that this all looks very black and white, even though it's in colour, that you could see this coming on the 4th floor, but I poured over the CCTV long and hard to get these images. The smoke obscuration up there was ceiling to floor for a long time, and we must have had a change of wind direction, and that's when we first spot the fire there an hour later.
Nick, can I just say on that, next time about the obscuration on level 4 there, in case you were wondering, the officer in charge did check level 4 on several occasions. Because it was so heavily smoke cloud, they couldn't see any sign of fire. So,
yeah. Okay. Okay, and there's the plan drawing of it, and if we remember Andy's slide of there's where the vehicle is, there's where the outbreak of fire is, there's the ramp area, so we can conclusively say that it's come up through that and then spread to the 4th floor. Undoubtedly, the ramp became involved later in the fire and acted as a chimney and took everything right up to the building to take the total involvement of that building. I'm just aware, am I talking too fast here? Is everybody understanding me? We're okay? Good, good.
Say it again.
Okay. Okay. So this is the destruction and devastation of the fire taken from one of the floors. Now, I attended the fire on the night of the fire, and I did another operational shift on New Year's Day, primarily because it was time and a half. So I got involved in the aftermath as well, and I got involved with the BRE when we went along to have a look and investigate how the fire had started. And it's like a scene out of some kind of disaster movie. The scale of it is immense. We can see where the ceiling is, the concrete support. The structure is now unsafe, and it's still awaiting demolition. So our fire investigation into the incident was a little bit limited because we couldn't actually get to the vehicle itself, although we did take drones to try and get some footage of it, but we've basically just got shells of vehicles now. And that's the top floor, basically where the fire vented, and we can see that there are some vehicles here that are untouched. And in fact, when I was there on New Year's Day, my capacity as an operational officer, we found some dogs in a vehicle up here who were still alive, and we were able to rescue them. So we did get one positive out of the day.
Four dogs, wasn't it? No.
4, yeah. Okay, Andy alluded to the grills on the side of the building, and we did question whether they complied with regulations, whether they impinged upon the open-sided requirements, the 20th and the 40th rules, and then also they put all advertising hoardings along there because the customers of the Arena Convention Centre, Liverpool, don't like to come out and look at a car park, so they say, well, dress it in something else. And the BBC was one of the prime movers for that. So we questioned that. So I was in this sector during the fire, and this was sector 1 here, and this was our sector, and we had ground monitors working on that fire, and they were just bouncing off the building. Okay. This is the protected shaft. Again, the protected shafts did their job, and the fire doors did their job, and we've had inquiries from all over the country as to who made these fire doors. And that was another afternoon of my life that I lost because I had to go to Liverpool Local Authority Building Control. I phoned him up and said, do you have any information about those doors? He said, yeah, we'll have it here somewhere. You can see what's coming. So I turn up with my colleague. 9 boxes, this big, full of papers. But we did find it. Okay, this is the floor where the firefighting action took place predominantly. And we see the heat there that has burnt the hose away. Here, and we question here whether there was some kind of running fuel fire. I'm sure our engineers and experts will be able to look at that a little bit closer, but we thought that the spoiling of the concrete, the vaporized hose, and the mottled complexion there might have indicated a pooled fire. Okay, I've been given the 5-minute shout.
Nearly there.
I could talk about this for about an hour, to be honest with you, some of the bizarre behaviours that went on. All these people here walked past the fire. It was nice, wasn't it, the show? None of them phoned the fire service. The fire was at this state, it was just about at this state when somebody phoned in, at 16:42. And if we recall back to Andy, the quicker we get there, and the heavier the weight of attack, the more chance we've got of suppressing it. Again, sprinklers may have helped us out. Okay. Is the fire service arriving at 16:45? No, it isn't. It's an event firefighting team from Bolesworth Events who attend the scene under blue lights in a van. Everyone thinks the fire brigade's here. It's all right. All the calls coming into the fire service stop at that point, and that's vital information that attending crews would have had with more calls. They could have got to the scene of the fire quicker. Also, one of the people who you saw on an earlier still came down at 16:45 and started directing horses out of the stables. Bridle up your horses, we're going out. So that could have been a potential disaster into the oncoming operational vehicles. And again, that was complicated by 3 different sets of people, 3 different organisations looking after the management of the building on that day, with the stables, the arena and the full City Council. Very fortunate that that didn't happen. Okay, so pretty much bang on time there. Whistle-stop tour through the human behaviour, and I think some of our colleagues have put in their workshops have done a much more eloquent case than I could do towards that. Again, we'll ask that rhetorical question, and I won't patronise you with a show of hands. Do building regulations require revision? For Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, yes, they do. And our conclusions are that minimum requirements under the provisions are not good enough, and building designers, building owners and building managers, I think, need to take some responsibility for that. We advocate sprinklers in all car parks, even open-sided. And let me just give you a quick anecdote to show the thought processes behind some designers and some owners, that the regeneration, the next car park that should be built in place of this, guess what? No sprinklers, similar drainage system, but they've gone one better. They don't have aluminium trays, they have plastic trays. Okay, we're not going to finish on a low. Again, the dogged fire service went in and said, no, that's not happening. And they are actually now going to fit sprinklers to the new car park. And my colleagues back in the UK tomorrow have a meeting with private owners of car parks, some of the major players in the UK, with a view to hoping to push this through. Anyway, that concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank you very much for making Andy and I very welcome throughout the days we've been here. And as we said before, any questions you want to ask us, we're here for the rest of the day, and we welcome that discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andy and Nick. Thank you, Andy and Nick. Does it feel right to do no questions at all? Don't you think so? Do you, maybe no, we're not going to do any questions because that's what we said. But it feels that we have tons of questions about this presentation, and I think it was very inspiring for us, and it's also very impressive to see what's happening, especially when you don't expect it. So I think it was very good for us to get that you give us this knowledge, and I know there's a lot of information on your website, so I advise you to go there and to find the reports. It's really interesting.